I like to make my presentations very interactive. So if at any point you have any questions or you feel free to put them in the chat, I'll be looking there. Also in the chat is the handout. It's a really great handout. If you haven't downloaded it, please do so. I think, Steve, thank you very much. Just put the link into the chat so you can download it. Lots of information on there, including some additional resources. I promise to give you everything I have in the time we have. I know, though, from experience, some of you will want to dive deeper. So there's excellent resources there, infographics, things that you can use, and especially what you can use if for some of you that are going to the event tonight, you're going to be able to use what you've learned here today at that event. So I'll give you a lot of really great information. Just real quick, I've been in business for over 20 years showing businesses how to scale. We practice what we teach. I'm also the owner of an 8,100 square foot co-working and conference center in Livonia called the Business Innovation Lab. And it's really exciting. I love what I do, and people ask me how I got started. So just a really quick story before we get into the content, which will give you a chance to download the handout. I remember I enjoyed a very successful career in the corporate world for many years, about 17 years. And one day the decision was made to dismantle the division I was working in. And so I laid a lot of great people off, including myself. And one day as I was driving to a networking appointment, I was asking the question, is starting a business and writing a book the right decision? And all of a sudden something popped up from the freeway. It headed straight at me, and I closed my eyes. I put my hands over my face. I heard this big whooshing sound and dinging going around in my front seat. And I opened my eyes to find a shattered windshield, a softball-sized hole in the windshield, and a 4-foot, 5-pound semi-truck's tire iron in the front seat of my car. All the while I'm saying, I'm okay, I'm okay. I got off to the side of the road where I landed in a parking lot, called the police, and got out of the car to look at the extent of the damage. I shook off all the shards of glass, although not a scratch on me. And it was then that I realized just how lucky I was. There's a 6-inch gash in the steel hood of the car that the tire iron peeled open, actually changing the trajectory of that tire iron. And when each police officer came on scene that day, they looked at me, they looked at the original trajectory of the tire iron, and each one of them said, you know, ma'am, you're on this earth for a reason. So moments earlier, I'd been asking, is starting a business and writing a book the right decision? And so I think I got my answer 3 different times. And I did write the book, Me, Myself, and Why, The Secrets to Navigating Change. That became a bestseller next to Jack Canfield's Chicken Soup for the Soul, and Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and still sells on Amazon and our website today. So a lot of people, I had a mentor ask me, he says, you know, you're having a lot of really great early successes. I've been in business 20 years, but this is when I first started. And he said, can you tell me what you're doing? So as I was explaining to him, he said, can you teach this to other businesses? I said, absolutely. And so I began to teach this proprietary system that shows businesses how to scale. And a big piece of this is understanding human wiring. Now, it's a distinction, and for those of you that might have PhDs, it's an evolution on trait theory, and it's separate and distinct from behaviors. Your natural wiring is something you're born with, and it's noticeable about 2 years old. We have this nature versus nurture conversation about human wiring. So how many of you might have somebody, you can raise your hands, how many of you might have somebody in your life and you just don't get them? Like you just don't understand them? Yeah, I think we can all say we have somebody in our life and we just don't get them. Maybe it's a client, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's somebody you network with, right? But the more you understand the cues, the more you understand that there is a distinction between human wiring, something you're born with, is noticeable about 2 years old. So when the neural pathways in your brain are developing, it's saying, how does this person create ideas? How does this person communicate? What is the environment or process thought? What is the environment in which they best thrive? And and how much structure, information, and certainty do they need for effective decision making? Now, when we look at the nature versus nurture conversation, we know that your behaviors change over time, right? You don't behave the same way that you did when you were 18. Now, why don't you behave the same way that you were when you were 18? Why? Because certain things impacted you throughout your life. You learned from them. So what are some of those things that you learned from? Either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. What were some of those things that you learned from that influenced your behavior? Yes. Mistakes. Yes. Parents. Yes, for sure. Parents had to influenced us, right? Owning a business. Absolutely. Other successes. Teachers. Beautiful. Yes. Education. Relationships. Failures. Yep. Coaches. Yes. Absolutely. Our experiences, many of you mentioned a couple of experiences. Yes, all those things shaped your behaviors. But here's the thing. Your human wiring is something that's part of your nature. And it's noticeable about 2 years old. It stays with you your entire lifetime. There are 4 major elements within human wiring that can be measured. You can be high in any one of them or low in some of them. High or low does not mean good or bad. High, it just is. It exists. And when you understand the elements of them, you can better communicate the way the other person wants to receive their communication. And when you do this with a level of mastery and communicate the way they want to receive it, it's the highest form of honoring the other person. I'll also give you some case studies that we've done with our clients and the outcomes of them just by understanding human wiring and how that interacts with your business systems within your whole business, because we take a systems approach, a very holistic approach to scaling a business. So the first element that you'll see on your handout is the autonomy element, Now, if you're higher in autonomy, what does that mean? You like a more of a my way orientation. You like your autonomy. You like to create and act on your own ideas, and you accept and give conflict. You accept and you give conflict. Now, you're often driven by no. So if somebody, even as a child, if somebody said, don't touch that stove, it's hot. What do you think a child higher in autonomy would do, right? They would touch the stove. They would touch the stove. Can anybody identify with that? You know, show your hands. Yeah. So it's more of a my way orientation. You're actually driven by no. You often speak in terms of I, me, and my. And your superpower, every element has a superpower. Your superpower is you like to create and act on your own ideas. You create and act on your own ideas. Now, there's strengths and limitations to everything. So if you're creating and acting on your own ideas, you're advocating for your ideas. You're willing to have a little bit of debate and conflict about your idea. What's the potential limitation? You like your ideas best, right? You're going to willing to activate. Now, could somebody be sharing a great idea with you? Absolutely. And just understand that you want to advocate for your own idea and you are willing to debate it with someone. But conversely, there are others who are lower in the autonomy scale. They like more of a team orientation. They like harmony. They want the best idea and they want to minimize conflict. So they're willing to discuss something. They don't want to debate something. Especially now, remember, everybody adapts, everyone adapts, but just understand, you know, if they're feeling like their idea is debated, what's typically going to happen? They may shut down. They may not share their ideas. So it's important to understand and really honor how the other person is wired so that you maximize the ideas that are shared. Now, this element, superpower, though, if you're lower on the autonomy scale, is you're more of a natural team player. And it doesn't mean people higher on the scale can't be team players. Just understand that someone lower is a natural team player. They want the best idea, doesn't have to be their idea. And the limitation is sometimes they'll ask a lot of people for their ideas and it slows down decision making. Okay, so just understand the dynamics here. The second element we're going to talk about is the communication element. And this is about how people process thought. Now, everybody talks and everybody thinks. Everybody talks and everybody thinks. This is how you process information. And as you go to your networking the next time, or you go to an in-person event tonight, just notice. And notice on the communication scale what people are saying and how they're saying it. So people higher on the communication scale, they love face-to-face communication. They are energized by face-to-face communication. They're what I call my external thinkers. So they think aloud. And when they're thinking aloud, they naturally want a response. They want a response. And if they don't get a response, they'll start to repeat themselves. So they talk in verbal, they also talk in verbal word pictures. So it's really important. They also talk in us and we, even though they may mean just themselves. They'll still say, we did this and we did that, even though they mean themselves. Now, it's important that if you're not working, or if your client is an external thinker, again, they're thinking out loud to crystallize their thoughts. So they verbalize to crystallize. So just understand that they need to do that. In fact, you know, an external thinker might go into an office and say, I just need to talk through this with you. And they'll, you know, you won't say a word, but yet they've verbalized all their thoughts. And at the end of the conversation, they said, oh, this was great. Thank you so much. You didn't say a word, because you allowed them to have the space to verbalize what they were thinking. Conversely, we have those that are lower in the communication. Now, if you're lower in communication, you're more of an internal thinker. You like to give a response after your thoughts are complete. And you might give a blank processing stare, and it looks like this. So as someone's talking to you, you'll have a blank stare over your face. In fact, sometimes people will start repeating themselves to you. You also talk in direct statements of fact. I had one time given a talk in front of, there's had to be about over 150 business owners. And I had a woman approach me after the event, and she extended her hand. First thing out of her mouth was, you just saved my marriage. And I said, what did I say? She said, I am higher on the communication scale. There's no doubt I'm an external thinker. My husband, he's the internal thinker. And every time I would say something, I would get that blank stare. But I made it mean. He didn't love me. He didn't care what I had to say. And, you know, did he even want to stay married? Did what I had to say important? She said, now I realize he just needs time to think about stuff. And I just need to be silent long enough for him to think it through. She said, so that opened up a whole new world of possibility in her relationship with her husband. Now, replicate that anywhere, whether it's a client, whether it's a prospect, whether it's a referral source or referral partner. And just honor that some people will need that think time to process what you're saying. In fact, I've worked with all kinds of organizations, and when I go into organizations, especially if it's around sales, and the salespeople love sales because they're out there, they're face to face, and sometimes they don't realize that they need to allow the silence. And I'll ask them, have you ever talked yourself out of a sale? Invariably, hands will go up. Simply because they needed to be silent, and sometimes that's uncomfortable for some people. So how many of you think you're higher on the communication scale? You're more of an external thinker. Okay, just again, notice how many of you think you're lower on the communication scale, very direct and internal thinker. Okay, a few of you. Okay, got it. Thank you very much. Yeah, and again, not right, not wrong. Just understand your superpower, if you're higher on the scale, is you're more of a proactive communicator. You're going to be actively concerned of others. Can I help you? You want to give and get help. People lower on the communication scale is your thoughtfulness. You will think things through. The wonderful thing about understanding communication is then you can then circle back, because sometimes an internal thinker, their best idea is about an hour after a meeting. And so it's always helpful then to know what do we need to set up in our organizations to really capitalize on everybody's human wiring. And it could be as simple as sending out an agenda ahead of time to give those people that are internal thinkers time to think and be prepared to come to the meeting. So simple things like that can make a real impact. The third element is the patience element. And as you look at patience higher on the scale, and this is the environment in which you best thrive. So people that are higher on the patience scale are more patient. You're going to be more longer term focused. You're going to seek predictability. You implement change, you follow the plan, and you are distracted by constant interruptions. Really important to understand that. And sometimes people will say, you're so nice. So pretty much all your life, people have told you that. If you're more on the lower side of patience, you are more impatient. You have a short attention span. You like to juggle multiple things. You accept unpredictability. You innovate change. You make course corrections. You create interruptions. Now, I had a CEO that I mentored, and one day she called me. She said, Lisa, I have the nicest assistant. I don't understand what happened. She blew up at me. And I said, okay, well, tell me what happened. So as she's describing it, now I understand how both are wired. And she's kind of describing the series of events that led up to this burst. And she goes, she's so nice. It was so unexpected. But what she was describing is that in every minute, she would interrupt her assistant who was higher on the patience scale, her assistant who needed to button down what she was working on and then switch gears. But she wasn't allowing her to do that. It was constant interruptions. Well, unfortunately, your brain, if you're higher in the patience scale, is wired to come to a completion. And so it's extremely frustrating for individuals wired this way to then switch gears. It's more natural for people who are lower in patience to do that. So I suggested a few things to her. I said, look, let's measure let's measure this and her productivity over but with some changes. I said, if you need to interrupt her, send her an email and say, you know, when you finish doing what you're doing, please come see me. Or at the beginning of the day, identify what the priorities of the day are so she understands what the priorities are. Making this small change over time obviously relieved her assistant's stress from constant interruptions, but she ended up being 40% more productive over 30 days. And this is simply by understanding and honoring human wiring. So these are the things to really understand too when you're building your team and when you're expanding your business, to align people for the right positions. A little bit larger company that we worked for had 99% turnover in one of their departments. And I asked them, I said, who are you hiring for these positions? They were like, well, we want to hire, external thinkers, people higher in communication. They're going to be talking on the phone. They're going to be putting, things into the computer. And I said, and how's your turnover? Well, we've got 99% turnover. We don't know why we have it. I said, well, the one person that's actually performed in your department, how do you think they're wired? They're like, oh, we're sure she's an external thinker. I said, really? I said, okay, well, let's take her assessment and see. And simply by taking the assessment, they discovered she's high in patience and actually low in communication. See, internal thinkers more aptly enjoy being on the phone and or email, which is the primary pieces of this position. And when they used certain words to attract their ideal, the people that were wired in a certain way to fulfill in that position, they literally went from 99% turnover to 0 in 3 months. And here's why: because now those individuals can do work that's in alignment with who they naturally are. And so, again, you can see bottom line results just by understanding and honoring a person's natural wiring. It affects a whole part of the organization. Your superpowers, if you're higher in patience, you affiliate, you follow the plan, you're warm, you're friendly, especially over the phone, which was in the last case study that I mentioned. Lower in patience, you respond to pressure. You're a natural juggler by your nature. And the final element is the certainty element. In the certainty element, if you're higher in certainty, you like detailed information. You want proof from valued subject matter experts. You like the rules, the regulations, the structure, and you want information. If you don't have the information, you're going to ask a lot of questions. So just because someone is asking a lot of questions, just understand they're trying to get their natural wiring met by that information that's missing for them to make a decision. You're lower on the communication scale. You like the summary sheet of information. You like to pick and choose proof. You like exceptions to rules and regulations, and you like your flexibility. So understand that you give your information in bullet points, but if you're talking to somebody higher in certainty, they're going to ask you details. They're going to ask you questions to fill in those blanks. And conversely, if you're higher in certainty, just notice if you're talking to somebody who likes their information in bullet points, because you might be giving them too much information. How many of you think you're higher on the certainty scale? You like information, structure, certainty. And how many of you think you're more lower on the certainty? You like to shoot from the hip. Okay, got it. Yeah. So again, people higher in certainty, your superpower is you're attentive to details. You want to cross your T's and dot your I's. Just understand that sometimes the amount of perfection that you're trying to achieve from that may not yield a return, because you're really focused on a lot of the detail. And just understand when you need to make it the decision and just go without information. So we all have to naturally, we all have to manage our natural wiring at some point. If you're lower on the certainty scale, your superpower is you're creative. You're creative in fashioning new approaches, like out of the box things, because rules and guidelines to you rules and regulations, if you're lower on the certainty scale, are simply guidelines. So it's important just to understand natural human wiring when communicating. So tonight, when you're at the networking event, simply notice what people are saying and how they're saying it. Are they talking in we and us, or are they talking more in I, me, and my? Are they, and again, if somebody's talking in I, me, my, they like their ideas, they like high-level discussions. They want to talk about results. If it's a we, they're going to be more, they want to verbalize to crystallize their thoughts. And understand if they're higher in patience, they're probably going to be more chatty. And if they're high in certainty, you're going to notice they're going to have more information or questions that they're going to be asking for you. Just a couple of things too, for those of you well, first of all, are there any questions? I know I went through this. I only have 30 minutes, so I wanted to kind of get it all done so that we can ask any questions. Michael, I think, has a question.
What do you, let's see, how do I say? I feel like I'm all three in some cases. How do I figure that out?
Well, all three in what? What are you talking about? Which all three?
Internal thinker, certainty. Some of the things you're explaining, I feel like that's me dealing with a lot of customers. How do I gauge that?
The only real way to know is to take the psychometric tool that we have. There's a variety of ways to do that. Okay. Now, again, we all adapt. The only real way to know is to take the assessment number one. So there's different ways to do that. I put them on the handout, by the way. We have different programs that do that. We have our Wired to Win program. It's a 2-day immersion into human hardwiring, and that's next month in May. And also, so there's part of you that is naturally adaptive, and we can tell the changes that are working or not working for you based on your natural wiring. So there's different data points that are within the assessment. And one way too is look at when you are under stress. Now, when you're under stress, you'll naturally go to your wiring, okay? Because your stress will amplify your wiring. So let's say you are someone, let's say you're high in autonomy, stress you'll be more commanding, and let's just get it done and let's get the end result and ask for forgiveness later. All right, so when you're under stress, people higher in communication will tend to talk through want to talk through or verbalize their issues. Higher in patience, you're going to want to make a list and do the list in the order in which to make the list. And until that's complete, sometimes it's hard to take that next action. Higher in certainty, you're going to ask questions. You're going to want information to make that decision. So again, natural stressors will amplify and also be indicators of your natural wiring. Great question.
Well, we've got 1 more minute for one more question, as long as it's direct and we can get it done in that amount of time. Does anybody else have a question? You can just unmute your hand or unmute and go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, I have a question or a comment, Steve. Jim Lininger from Financial Architects. Great job on coming up with this topic. And I know that it's really important to a lot of people. So we at our office here use something called Colby. Maybe you're familiar with that?
Colby?
Colby, C-K-O-L-B-E, that identifies the kind of personality that a person would have, both as a individual, say, financial person, as well as individual clients, to understand how to deal with people, how to what they're looking for. They may accumulate information differently than what I would think they would. So what you're doing is super important.
Yeah, thank you, Jim, for that. And your volume went down all of a sudden on my end, so I don't know if that was on my end or not. But yeah, so there are different assessments, and they do measure different things. Colby, you mentioned there are psychometric assessments, and based on how the assessment is administered, we'll get into tell us if number one, it gets into the behavior element, like DISC. I'm certified in DISC as well, but that's behavior based. Okay, when you get into psychometrics, it's more free will in the way that the assessment is administered, so we can actually get to the amygdala part of the brain without going into a lot of details and scientific details of that, but we can actually tap into the amygdala part of the brain and the natural wiring part of that. Again, there are some assessments that assess behavior, some that assess personality, and then still others that will assess human wiring. So the three are distinct, and that is a really great question. So thank you.
Good job.
Okay, hey, with that being said, We have borrowed our time up from Lisa Mininni. I think that you put so much information into such a short amount of time. I don't know how you could do it, but I followed all of it, and I think we all got a lot of value from your presentation today. So let's
Great,
put our
thank
hands
you.
together, everybody, and appreciate Lisa Mininni for offering
you.
wonderful information. You can find Lisa Mininni again at Excellerate Associates in the Business Innovation Lab in Livonia. You can connect with her on LinkedIn as well too. Let her know you found her at ReferralTopia. So once again, thank you so much, Lisa Mininni, for a great presentation today.
You're welcome.
I'll let
You're
everybody else know that's here right now. We have one final speed networking session, and that is at 1:30 today. That is for folks that are in the wellness or nonprofit space. So Carmo, I hope to see you there. And there's a lot of folks in that space. So if you're in that space or you'd like to meet people in that space, please come to our last session at 1:30. And then our final presenter today is 2:30, and that is Stan Phelps from the Goldfish series of books. So once again, Lisa Mininni, great job.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Great job.
Everybody that's here, please be sure you meet our expo exhibitors in between now and our next group gathering. Thanks so much.
Thank you.